your abstainment of other things, and your sincerity for Allah Azza wa Jal. So whoever has a fast that is truly for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, it is considered fi sabilillah. This is what he intends, Ibn Daqiq, ta'atuhu kayfa kanat, meaning the quality. What is meant by the fi sabilillah is the quality is fi sabilillah. The quality of your fast, it is considered for the sake of Allah, then you have this reward. And he says, wal awwalu aqrab. However, he says the first meaning of jihad is closer to the intent. And this is what we find, as we mentioned, al-Bukhari, his fiqh of the hadith, bringing us to that conclusion as well, as he mentioned it in Kitab al-Jihad. Side benefit before we move on. Even if this intent here, the sawm, the reward here is for the fasting that is done during jihad, if that is the intent, there is still a benefit for us to get from this, even though maybe we don't have a ability to perform this or attain this specific reward right now. But there is a benefit, and that is that the reward increased when the mashaqqa and the hardship increased. And this is a general rule for every act of worship, that when your mashaqqa, when your hardship increases in an action, your reward increases. Because these mujahideen, they're fighting and fasting. That's a hardship. And as we heard, it combined between two acts of worship, so Allah increased their reward. And this is found in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, that the one who goes through difficulty, his reward increases. From the adillah, or the evidences for that, is the Prophet ﷺ said what? He said that at the end of time, that there will come a time when al-qabidu ala dinihi kal-qabidu ala al-jamrah. That the one who holds on to it, there will come a time when the one who holds on to his religion is like the one holding on to hot coals. What did the Prophet ﷺ mention about their reward? That they will have the reward of 50 of you. Speaking to the companions. So the Prophet ﷺ said, when the Prophet ﷺ initially said, lahum ajru khamseen. He didn't specify from us or from the Sahaba. So the Sahaba asked, from 50 of them or 50 of us? He said, 50 of you. So the one who holds on to his religion, when it is as difficult as holding on to hot coals, then he has the reward of 50 of the Sahaba. This shows us that the increasing of hardship with an action increases its reward. So this we can implement and we can benefit from, because many of us, we try to take the easy way out when fasting becomes a little difficult. We want to quickly find a concession. And so I heard that some people, because they say their work is difficult, like their 9 to 5, they started, it became a common thing in some places that they break their fast because they have intensive manual labor. And even if we say that there is a fatwa that allows the one to break his fast, he's not traveling, he's not sick, but he just has a difficult job. Even if we say that there is a concession for him, if it is extremely difficult, then a person should not be easy going with this affair. Because, firstly, of the reward we just heard, that when the hardship becomes more difficult for you in an act of fasting, the reward is only increasing. As long as you are not harming yourself, as long as you are not bringing upon yourself harm or making yourself sick. And the Sahaba, it is mentioned about those who fasted during jihad, that it was told to them that if the fasting would make them weak and not able to fight, then they were told, yes, not to fast. But that one who fasts while in jihad is for the one who the fasting doesn't affect him or affect his fighting in the jihad. So if he finds that the fasting does not affect him, does not harm him, does not make him weaker, then he continues and he strives to combine between what? The jihad and the fasting, because of that tremendous reward. Likewise, when we study the affair of fasting and traveling and fasting and being sick, also the affair, even though there are concessions, the ulama spoke a lot about this, about yani that a person is not easygoing with yani the affair of breaking his fast, because there are many yani ahadith and ayat regarding this. Is not simply that a person breaks his fast automatically when he feels yani the slight sickness or slight difficulty, or if he's traveling somewhere close that doesn't bring him difficulty. It's not that he should automatically break his fast, but rather the affair is to do with al-mashaqqa, with the difficulty, when it becomes harmful for you, and that is when a person should, it is better for him to break his fast. And that is a large chapter, but that chapter of when you break your fast or not should also be understood in this light. This is the point that we want to bring. That there is a tremendous reward, and the reward increases when the hardship increases. We're going to move on to the next hadith. Next hadith is the hadith al-ashir, حديث سهل بن سعد. وعن سهل بن سعد رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إن في الجنة بابا يقال له الريان يدخل منه الصائمون يوم القيامة لا يدخل منه أحد غيرهم يقال أين الصائمون فيقومون فلا يدخل منه أحد غيرهم فإذا دخلوا أغلق فلم يدخل منه أحد. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in this hadith, as is reported by Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi al-Ansari, the young Sahabi who, radiyallahu anhuma, whose father was also a Sahabi from the Ansar. He says that the Prophet ﷺ said, in the paradise there is a gate called Ar-Rayyan. The people of fasting will enter through it on the day of judgment, and no one besides them will be permitted entry. It will be said, where are the people of fasting? And they will stand, and no one besides them will enter through it. Once they enter it, it will be locked. No one will enter after them, after they enter. This hadith is regarding this affair of the gates of paradise. And as we know, as it comes in some of the ahadith, that the gates of paradise are how many? Thamaniya, 8. The gates of paradise are 8. And the gates of Jahannam are how many? 7. Now, لها 7 أبواب. That has 7 gates, the hellfire. And as for the paradise, then it has 8 gates. This hadith is reported in Bukhari. Muslim is muttafaqun alayh. And it mentions the specific gate that is for the fasting individuals. What is intended here, يدخل منه الصائمون. الصائمون, the fasting individuals, it is not those who fasted Ramadan only. What is explained by the ulama is this is for the ones who fasted the supererogatory fast upon their obligatory fast of Ramadan. That they had a habit of fasting outside of Ramadan, the optional fasts. And they became known for that with Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah Azza wa Jal dedicated a gate for the sa'imun, for the fasting individuals. And it comes in another hadith that is also muttafaqun alayh, that there is another gate for the people of salah, people that had optional salawat, that they constantly prayed the supererogatory prayers. And that as a bab of salah, and there is a bab of sadaqah, and there is a bab of jihad for those who participated in these recommended acts of worship, and they became known for it. And the people of fasting, they have a bab as well. However, what Allah Azza wa Jalla specified their gate with is that He didn't call it by their act of worship. He called it Ar-Rayyan. And this, some of the ulama say, is in agreement and in accordance to what Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Hadith al-Qudsi, إِلَّا الصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. That the Prophet ﷺ said, that Allah said that the action can be multiplied. The action, when you do an act of worship, its reward is multiplied from 10 times in reward to 700 times. Except fasting. Fasting is not bound by that number. Illa Sawm. Sawm, Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Hadith Qudsi that He didn't restrain it or contain it to the number 700. Illa Sawm. فَإِنَّهُ لِي. Because it was done for my sake. What is intended here for my sake is that all the actions, we do them for Allah's sake. Correct? But as-siyam, Sawm, it exemplifies sincerity because no one knows if you're truly fasting but Allah Azza wa Jalla. No one knows if you're truly fasting but Allah Azza wa Jalla. And a person can't show off by saying I'm fasting. Because in front of us, you fast, but we don't know what you're doing when you're not in front of us. So it's not something you can show off with. Only Allah Azza wa Jalla knows if you're fasting. And so, because the act of worship, siyam, exemplifies sincerity in that fashion, then Allah Azza wa Jalla specified its reward with Him, or kept His reward hidden with Him. إِلَّا الصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّهُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ. I will reward specifically for it. And just as He specified it from the other actions in that hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that Allah specified the siyam and the people of fasting and their gate by calling their gate Ar-Rayyan, not calling it Bab al-Salah, Bab al-Siyam. He didn't call the gate of the ones who fasted, their gate, the gate of fasting. He called it what? Ar-Rayyan. Which brings us to the point of what is the meaning of Ar-Rayyan. Ar-Rayyan is from the word Ar-Ri. And Ar-Ri is the quenching of thirst. Ar-Ri is the quenching of thirst. And Ar-Rayyan is that which is abundant in quenching people's thirsts. So, this brings us to another qaida, principle in Islam and in Qur'an and Sunnah that we find al-Jazā'u min jinsil amal. Because the fasting individuals went thirsty for Allah Azza wa Jall's sake, He gave them a door in paradise named after the quenching of their thirst. And it comes in some narrations that in the Sunan al-Nasa'i, this hadith is also found in Sunan al-Nasa'i. And every time a hadith is brought from a different chain, sometimes we find additional wordings. In that hadith, there is an additional wording which says, "Man dakhalahu lam yadhma ba'da dhalika abadan." In Sunan al-Nasa'i, it mentions that whoever enters this Bab al-Rayyan, he will never go thirsty again. He will never go thirsty again. And this shows us that in the Jannah is levels. That the people who enter Bab al-Rayyan, their thirst is quenched greater than the thirst that is quenched outside of the Bab al-Rayyan. So even though everybody is drinking good in Jannah, inshallah, but not everybody drinks the same. Not everybody's thirst is quenched the same, even in paradise. That the people that enter Bab al-Rayyan, they never go thirsty. They never go thirsty. And this is a reward specific for those who went thirsty for Allah's sake in the dunya. And they practiced fasting abundantly. And so Allah Azza wa Jalla rewarded them appropriately. And so, this is Bab al-Rayyan, which is specific for the Sa'imun. And as we said, there are 8 gates of paradise. And in some narrations, we know that the Prophet ﷺ said that it will be said to certain individuals that you can enter from any of the 8 doors of paradise. As an honor for them, that it will be said to some individuals, as it comes in the hadith of Man asbagha al-wudu, whoever perfects his wudu. And then he says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Whoever says that after he has perfected his wudu, it will be said to him what? As an honor and as a gift to him, enter what? The paradise from any of the gates of paradise. And some of them, the ulama mentioned that, and because we have here لا يدخله منه أحد غيرهم. How do we combine between this hadith that says no one enters the Bab al-Rayyan except the fasting individuals, and then we have in the hadith of wudu that you can enter from any of the 8 gates. Also in the hadith of the woman, إذا صلت المرأة خمسها وحفظت فرجها وصامت شهرها وأطاعت زوجها قيل لها ادخلي الجنة من أي الباب شئت من أي أبوابها شئت. That if the Muslim woman prays her 5, fasts her month of Ramadan, and protects her privates, and she obeys her husband, then it will be said to her, enter from any of the gates of paradise. So it will be said to certain individuals, enter from any gate of paradise you wish. And in this hadith, the Bab al-Rayyan is only for the fasting. Ibn Hajar, he mentions that it will be said to them, enter, but it does not mean that they will enter. But that telling them that enter from where you wish is an honor. In itself is a gift. In itself, to tell an individual to enter from any of the gates of paradise you wish is an honor. And it is mentioned that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is from those individuals that it will be said to him, enter from any of the gates of paradise you wish. Then Ibn Hajar says, but as for the actual entering, then it will be based upon your amal, based upon your actions. Whatever actions were more prevalent in your ibadah, if you were from the people of fasting, then you enter from the people of fasting. And if you were from the people of the salah, you'll enter from the bab of salah, and likewise. So there is that jam' between this hadith that says that this gate is only for the fasting, and for those ahadith that say that you can enter from any of the gates of paradise you wish. عندك شيء؟ نعم. Hey, no. And some of them said that as well. And some of them said that when a person, it is said to him, enter from any of the gates, then Allah Azza wa Jalla will facilitate for him the actions of the people of those gates. And it is even said that some of them also said that entering from one gate does not prevent you from entering another gate. That in this hadith, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Inna fil jannah. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't say inna lil jannah. Like if I said this masjid has in it a door, or this masjid has a door, there's a difference. The door to the masjid is not a door in the masjid, correct? So if I tell you there's 8 doors in this masjid, and I can enter all those 8 doors. But if the 8 doors are to the masjid, then it's different. واضح? In the hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, Inna fil jannah. In the paradise, meaning you're already in paradise, and then there's a gate. There's a special gate, a reward that Allah Azza wa Jalla gifts certain individuals. And so some of them, they mentioned that these are not gates for you to enter paradise to begin with, but rather gates inside of paradise. Wallahu a'lam. Wal ilmu inda Allah. Now we move on to the next hadith. Hadith number 11. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم رب صائم ليس له من صيامه إلا الجوع ورب قائم ليس له من قيامه إلا السهر. That the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said that perhaps those who fast gain nothing from their fasting but hunger. And perhaps there are those who stand in prayer and gain nothing from their prayer but fatigue and tiredness. So what is the meaning of this? As we said earlier, that the fasting of two individuals is not necessarily equal in reward. Rather, every person who fasts has a reward based upon the quality of his fast. The quality of your fast. And that fast increases in reward based upon how much you preserved that fast. How much did you abstain from the haram while you were fasting? How much did you have remembrance of Allah Azza wa Jal and mindfulness in your fasting? So this also coincides with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man lam yada' qawl az-zur wal 'amal bihi falaysa lillahi hajatun fi an yada'a ta'amahu wa sharabah." Whoever does not leave off false speech. Qawl az-zur, some of them explained as false speech, lying and the likes. Wal 'amal bihi, and acting upon it. And some of them said it's general for sins and evil. Whoever does not leave off evil and false speech and lying while he is fasting, فَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ حَاجَةٌ فِي أَنْ يَدَعَ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ. Then Allah is in no need of you leaving off your food and drink. Allah is in no need of you leaving off your food and drink. Allah Azza wa Jal is not in need of anything from us. But what is intended in the hadith is that we do not fast to benefit anybody with the food and drink that we didn't eat. But rather why we fasted is what Allah said in the Qur'an, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to gain piety. And how will you gain piety? By learning self-control. So if you are abstaining from what is halal in origin while fasting, then it should be easier for you to abstain for what is haram in origin while fasting. And you train yourself that if I am going to abstain from something halal, then I surely must abstain from something haram while I'm fasting. And that builds discipline, self-control, that gains you taqwa, brings you taqwa. And so if a person is not abstaining from haram, it is not preserving his fast. And the Salaf, they spoke a lot about fasting and how a person should be while he is fasting. And some of them, they said that if a person is fasting, إذا كان صوم يوم أحدكم فليصم بصره, then let his sight also fast, and let his hands also fast. So everything fasts with you. Your body is fasting not only from food and drink, but from looking at the haram, listening to the haram, and walking to the haram. So this is what is intended by preserving your fast, and your fast being of benefit to you. But if you did not abstain from any of that, and only thing you're concerned with is food and drink, then the only thing you gained from your fasting is hunger. The only thing you gained, you didn't gain any reward. Because you diminished the reward by what? sin. The sin diminishes the reward. This is why we pay Zakat al-Fitr at the end of the month. Zakat al-Fitr is to purify the shortcomings in our fasting. Zakat al-Fitr in the end of the month of Ramadan was legislated what? To purify our shortcomings in the fasts. And so the fasting, if a person continuously sins while fasting and is heedless of Allah Azza wa Jal, he can diminish the reward to the point where there is no reward. But it still fulfills the obligation. Just like the salah. So a person can come out of the salah, no reward, but he still fulfilled the obligation. What's the proof? The Prophet ﷺ said about the one who drinks intoxicants. He doesn't accept his salah for how many days? 40 days. But does he have to pray? He still has to pray. And it fulfills the obligation. But no reward. La yuqbal. It's not accepted, meaning there's no reward for it. Likewise, the one who went to a sorcerer is not accepted for what? 40 days. What is intended here, Ibn Qayyim mentions that he still has to pray and fulfill his obligation, but he's not getting any reward. So perhaps a person prays and gets no reward. Perhaps a person fasts and gets no reward. And this is what is intended here. لَرُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعِ. Perhaps a person fasts and does not gain anything but hunger. He just starved himself for no benefit. And so that is not what we want to do in Ramadan. We want to attain the benefit, the great khair, the great good in this month of Ramadan. And as we heard in the previous talk, من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. This iman wa ihtisab is not this, is the opposite of this one. The one who fasts iman and wahtisaban is the opposite of this individual who fasted and didn't get anything from his fast but hunger. Because the one who fasted iman and wahtisaban, he is the one who is constantly mindful while he is fasting and seeking the reward of that fasting. So he's not going to allow himself to fall into sin and transgression while fasting. Also, likewise, as we said, with regards to the prayer, رُبَّ قَائِمٍ. This is the salah. Perhaps a person stands in the prayer and doesn't get anything from it but tiredness. So you can pray, and perhaps that prayer is accepted from you, but there's no reward. There is no reward. And the only thing you got out of it was being tired. Because the intention, based upon the quality of your action, is the reward. The hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, it is not only that the hadith, the action is rejected or accepted, but also what some of the ulama mentioned, the second part of it mentions that the reward is based on the intention. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. Meaning, every person will have a reward based on his intention. How sincere you were in the salah, how much you protected your salah from distractions and lahu. And all of this will determine the reward of your prayer. So the reward can go up and the reward can go down. As the shaitan can steal from your prayer. The shaitan continuously steals from your prayer until he leaves you with no reward. And that no reward leads you to just being a tired man after praying with no benefit. We ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to protect us from that. Ameen. And he mentions here, Al-Mubarak Furi mentions in the explanation of this hadith, he will not receive any reward because he did not fulfill the necessary conditions like sincerity and submissiveness. Meaning, in his fast, he wasn't sincere, meaning mindful of his intention always. The intention is something you protect. You mindful of it, so you protect it. Tujaddidu niyya, you renew your intention constantly throughout the day, so that you get reward for what you are doing. Because a person might sleep the whole day. He slept the whole day. There was no intention involved in that fasting. Yes, he fulfilled the obligation, but there was, from Fajr to Maghrib, there was no mindfulness. Is his reward going to be the same as the one who was awake the whole day and felt the thirst and purposely refrained with an intent, not because there was no food around or he wasn't reminded of food, but because he refrained? Is not the same. So based upon the intention and the sincerity and the submissiveness will be the reward. The last hadith for tonight is also the hadith of Abi Hurayrata radiyallahu anhu أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الصيام جنة إذا كان أحدكم صائما فلا يرفث ولا يجهل وإن امرؤ قاتله أو شاتمه فليقل إني صائم مرتين. This hadith is the hadith of Abi Hurayrah radiyallahu anhu. And the wording of this narration from Abi Dawood is that as-siyamu junnah, fasting is a protection. If one of you is observing the fast, then he should not use obscenities, al-rafath. Al-rafath is also lewd and vulgar statements. وَلَا يَرْفَثْ وَلَا يَجْهَلْ, and nor commit acts that are ignorant, act upon ignorance while he is fasting. And if anyone was to fight him or insult him, then he should say, I am fasting, I am fasting. Inni mru'un sa'imun. This hadith has also come in Bukhari. The wording in Bukhari is الصيام جنة فلا يرفث ولا يجهل. Siyam, fasting, is a protection for you. So do not speak with obscenities or vulgar statements, and do not act upon ignorance. وَإِنِ امْرُؤٌ قَاتَلَهُ أَوْ شَاتَمَهُ فَلْيَقُلْ إِنِّي صَائِمٌ مَرَّتَيْنِ. And then the continuation of that in Bukhari is وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَخَلُوفُ فَمِ الصَّائِمِ أَطْيَبُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى مِنْ رِيحِ الْمِسْكِ. That the breath of the fasting by the one whose hand is my soul, that the breath and the smell of the fasting person's mouth is better with Allah Azza wa Jal than the smell of musk. يَتْرُكُ طَعَامَهُ وَشَرَابَهُ وَشَهْوَتَهُ مِنْ أَجْلِي. He leaves off his food and his drink and his desires for my sake. الصِّيَامُ لِي وَأَنَا أَجْزِي بِهِ وَالْحَسَنَةُ بِعَشْرِ أَمْثَالِهَا. The wording here that is brought from Ibn Majah, from Abi Dawood, from Sunan Abi Dawood, and we know that Sunan Abi Dawood focuses on ahadith al-ahkam. Ahadith al-ahkam, the ahadith that they are related to the rulings and jurisprudence of the acts of worship. So in this hadith, it is regarding some of the rulings and actions and behavior of the fasting individual. And that in the beginning of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ called fasting a protection. It is a protection for you in this life and the next. It is a protection for you in this life because it protects you from falling into haram. What did the Prophet ﷺ advise with the one who can't get married? فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ فَإِنَّ لَهُ وِجَاء. What is the wija? That the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith that a person, if he cannot get married, he should fast because it is for him wija. What is wija? Castration. As if a person was castrated when he fasts properly. But the problem is we don't fast properly. If a person was to fast and his eyesight was fasting with him and his ears are fasting with him and his heart is truly abstaining, then he would see that it is like a castration for him. It protects him from falling into haram. It weakens the desires. It weakens the desires. And a person might fast and then he says, no, but it's not working for me. How many times we hear a person says, you tell him to advise him with fasting and he says, fasting is not working for me. Well, maybe you're not fasting right. Maybe that you only think about food and drink. But you're not looking at, and you're paying attention to what you're looking at while you're fasting. What you're doing at night before you're fasting and after you fast. Your alignment, your actions for the one who wants to truly protect himself, even when he's done fasting, he doesn't do that which repels the benefits of fasting. Oh, I fasted in the day, now it's night, I can do what I want. No, the person in his night, he is compounding the benefit by engaging in acts of worship, just as we do in Ramadan. So don't repel the benefits of fasting at night and then expect it to benefit you in the long term. Also, the fasting, as we said, is not just abstaining from food and drink. When a person fasts properly, then you will see that it is a protection for him from his own desires. But also, in the akhirah, it is a protection from the hellfire. So this is why fasting is a protection for you. And then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned some guidelines for the fasting individual. That he should not speak with obscenities and vulgar statements. That he guards his tongue. Person who is fasting, then his tongue fasts. The fasting in the language is what? Abstaining, imsak. What did Maryam alayhi salam, she was advised to what kind of fast? Not speaking. So that fasting of Maryam alayhi salam, of not speaking, we can also observe it while we are fasting. Not speaking except if there is true benefit. And in reality, this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. So you are in origin supposed to fast from speaking unless there's benefit. But this fasting now, when you are fasting, you should not speak except where there is clear benefit. And it is mentioned that in the ulama of hadith, when it came to Ramadan, it is mentioned, Wallahu a'lam, if it's authentic, but it is mentioned that the ulama of hadith, because they would grade the men of the isnad, and they would speak about the authenticity of the isnad and the rijal, and the men of the narrators of the isnad, they would constantly be speaking about people's honors and whether they are trustworthy or they're liars or they're innovator, and they're constantly speaking about this. But in the month of Ramadan, it is mentioned that they would refrain out of fear that they would say something that was overboard, or they spoke with too much about a narrator, or they spoke with something that was not true, that would ruin their fast. So this speaking about the narrators, it is from the lawful speech that is protection for the religion. Now, a person does not speak about an individual of, of knowledge except to either warn the people from him or to mention his trustworthiness or lack of. And this is what the ulama of hadith they did. This was not considered backbiting because it was done for what? For preservation of the religion. But they feared that if they spoke with something not true, or they went to, they transgressed, they might have spoke too much about an individual where it ended up being, because this speaking it should be kept to the minimum, what fulfills the need. So if they felt if they spoke too much about a narrator, it might fall into backbiting. So they didn't want to fall into backbiting while fasting. So they refrained from talking about the narrators in Ramadan. It is mentioned that some of them they did this to preserve their fast. And so a person is careful about what he says, who he speaks about, what he is doing in the month of Ramadan, so that he is having a fast that is truly a protection for him, and he is not falling into speaking with ignorance, speaking with statements of lewd, obscene, vulgar statements. What is meant by this is a person might be carried away in speaking about women while fasting until he ends up speaking about something that is not appropriate for the fasting individual. And even with his wife, they say, and there will come ahkam that a person, if he fears that the kalam will lead to something that will spoil the fast or ruin the fast, then he should also refrain, even from with his wife. And so this is what is meant by al-rafath and al-jahl. That when the person al-jahl, acting out of ignorance or speaking with ignorance, is cursing, insulting individuals, or fighting, or transgressing in any way. However, he says, the Prophet ﷺ, if someone was to fight you, someone was to come to you now and try to fight you, what is upon you to do? The answers I heard is defend yourself. And this is actually true. Shaykh Amīn actually mentions this, that this hadith does not mean you don't defend yourself. He says, بل لابد من المدافعة. You must defend yourself, right? Don't put yourself in harm's way. However, that defending of yourself should not become an offensive attack, should not become a transgression. And rather, if a person can step away from the situation and remove himself in totality without engaging in any of that, just as we said, when a person speaks about the narrators, he can transgress and fall into backbiting. When you are fighting in the individual, it can quickly change from self-defense to what? To aggression and transgression. It could quickly change. So in order for you to protect yourself from all of that, you remove yourself and say, Inni sa'im. I'm fasting. I don't want to get into all of that. I don't want to get close to the line that I might cross it. So I remove myself from that. I remove myself from that situation. And he says, not that, and the ulama, they say, not that you are boasting about your fasting. This is also important, that this is not meant as you don't say it with the intention to show off. Because a person might be fasting outside of Ramadan. He shouldn't say this to the individual showing off. He should clarify his intention that it is what? To remind himself not to transgress while fasting. Because this is also a slippery slope. Now, a person might be one who fasts Mondays and Thursdays. And when people come to speak to him and stuff like that, he becomes a habit of telling them, oh no, I'm fasting. This is not appropriate for no reason to tell people you're fasting. It is not an obligatory fast. It is not appropriate to say just to people, I am fasting for no need. And this is, as we know, the Salaf used to hide their good deeds. Until some of the Salaf, they would fast and their family members would not know they're fasting. The family members in the house would not know they're fasting. So the Salaf used to hide their good deeds. So there's no need for you to tell the people when there is nobody trying to fight you that I am fasting. Even if a person invites you, and sometimes you might want to be cordial and respectful to reject the invite, but you can reject the invite in other ways. You don't have to say I'm fasting. You don't have to say you're fasting. And we know that it is permissible to say it. It is permissible to say it. To an individual, I'm fasting. But a person should keep his intention sincere. While if he has to say the statement, I am fasting, then he says it with the intention of what? To remind himself that he is fasting. This is what the intention here is. Not just to tell the person that you don't want to engage, but to remind yourself, Inni sa'im. Remind yourself that what? You're fasting. You don't want to transgress the boundaries while you are fasting. So this is an important benefit here, that we remain sincere in our fasting and we protect it at all costs. We protect the fasting from any transgression, any acting upon ignorance, any heedlessness. And when we are in a situation, when someone transgresses against us, or gets in an argument with us, or it doesn't have to be a physical fight, it can be just an argument, that a person, he removes himself and says, I am fasting. Even some of the ulama mentioned that, does he say it to himself or does he say it to the other person? There's a discussion. There's a discussion even in the hadith. Does he say it to himself or does he say it to the other person? There's a whole discussion about this, and so this is important to know that is not the point is that you don't say this to show off, to tell the people, look, I'm fasting. But rather, if it is said to another person, it is to remind yourself, and for perhaps if he is fasting as well, to remind him to not transgress. To not what? Transgress while in a state of fasting, so that it doesn't ruin that fast for both of you or for one of you. Al-Allama Ibn Baz, he says, when asked whether backbiting invalidates the fast, he said, backbiting does not break the fast. Likewise, tail carrying, abuse, and revilement. None of these break the fast. However, they diminish and decrease its reward. And this is what we mentioned, that these sins, they diminish the reward. So al-ghiba, backbiting, and namima, tail carrying, there's now this tail carrying is widespread. Something happens in the Eastern Hemisphere, now through WhatsApp, everybody's talking about it. You're talking about individuals you don't even know. You don't know what they look like, but you're spreading kalam. And something happens in the West, they spread it in the East. And all this tail carrying that takes place is all sinful behavior that it ruins the benefit of fasting. And it diminishes the reward until it becomes, like we said in the hadith before, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ لَيْسَ لَهُ مِنْ صِيَامِهِ إِلَّا الْجُوعِ, until that person who fasted gains nothing from his fast except hunger. And so we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect us from that. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to reach the month of Ramadan and make us from those who fasted imanan wa ihtisaba, and make us from those who stand in the night prayer imanan wa ihtisaba in the month of Ramadan. I suffice with this for tonight. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين.